are back for another episode of Executive Conversations, where I talk to marketing and go-to-market leaders about how they get internal buy-in from various stakeholders to be able to actually execute on the marketing plans that they have. Today, I'm really excited to speak to Lisa Vecchio, VP of Marketing, formerly at Aircall, Hootsuite, Expedia, 2 decades of experience in SaaS and B2B. And I'm really excited to speak to Lisa today. We met before at the CMO School Pavilion, and then we met in person a few weeks ago at SaaStr in London, and we had a big chat about this. So I'm really excited to bring you on today. How's it going, Lisa?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me. And I think meeting you IRL was just really cemented that new friendship.
Yeah, definitely. It makes such a difference.
It does. It absolutely
To meet
does.
people in real life. Because even the CMO school was great, but even in the group like Zoom chat, you don't really have a chance to get to know people.
Absolutely. And SaaStr was a great way to see those familiar faces.
Yes, love it. So today, let's just dive into the topic because we were
Sure.
already chatting. And I know you have a lot to share about this topic. So the first thing, and this is kind of what I ask everybody to get started, is in our marketing career, when we are initially getting started in marketing, we want to learn marketing skills, how to run ads, how to get content to work, those kind of things. But there's some point in our marketing careers where we learn that one of the most important skills is getting stakeholder buy-in. So could you just walk me through your journey as a marketer of when you realized you needed to build this skill and kind of how you went about building it?
Yeah, I mean it's a huge question because I feel like there's probably not one point in time. It's little bits that you pick up along the way as you get put in new and challenging situations. I'm recalling that, when I spent my first 5 years working in ed tech in the US, and then I relocated to Australia. And I remember when I was out there, I was kind of field marketing, product marketing, working with the sales team. And my general manager came to me and said, you know what, we're like leaking revenue from this one, channel source. Can you just come up with an experiment that's going to, help us find a new source of growth? It's like, oh yeah, that's something everyone can just come up with. But I ended up kind of doing this test for this direct to student website, which within 3 years became a $2 million business. Great. Hands on, very, very tactical, testing lots of different things to make it work. But it was the first time I really had to then present back to this general manager. I had finance in the room. And I also had like the big brother of the US, right? Because I was out in Australia, a subsidiary of the bigger org, kind of going, what are they doing out there? Are they breaking the rules? So I really needed to like step up, not only my presence, but also thinking about what I was kind of using in these interactions, really bringing data to the forefront of my conversations. And it was fantastic because it also gave me a level of visibility I probably didn't have, at that point in my career.
Yeah, it's a really tough skill to learn. I started learning it when I started the agency as well, because I think as a freelancer, I didn't really have to do that.
Mm,
A lot more tactical as a freelancer. It was, I just need this thing done. And then when I started becoming a little more strategic, you start to say, oh, I actually have to present not only the idea and why I think it's going to work, but like you said, present the results back and
yeah.
say, this is what experiments worked and what didn't work. Did you have to do anything to explain why you selected each experiment?
Yeah, I think it changes the level of accountability you have, right? You all of a sudden, if I'm going to say, okay, I've got limited amount of budget, I'm going to put it in this pot. Why did I do that? And so I think with a lot of these conversations, you're educating at the same time that you're presenting the data. So, I've got a general manager and a CFO who don't really get digital marketing. They didn't really get SEO. They just knew these buzzwords and were like, do more of that.
Yeah.
So with everything I did, it was about kind of incrementally doing it and then showing it and saying, right now we want to double down on this tactic.
Yeah. So you have a lot of experience in marketing leadership at an executive level. Can you, and I know you have a lot of experience as well reporting to different kinds of people. So why don't you walk me through what it's like to report to when you have to report to different positions, or the if you didn't have to report to anyone, how would things be different for you?
Yeah. It's a great question because, when I've worked in smaller orgs, you were saying like, 5 to 10 million ARR. I'm reporting to the founder or the CEO. And those personalities, especially founding personalities, can be quite strong, right? And quite specific and often like really kind of lots of changes frequently. In my more recent roles, I've been reporting into a CMO, and at my most recent role, reporting into a CMO, being a right arm is great, right? Because we're able to kind of influence the C-suite through this senior person. And so looking at the go-to-market motions and what I felt we could be doing differently, or we might want to advance on or pivot away from. A lot of that I was fueling her with to then, get buy-in, or we just do it, right? I had the team in front of me to just run.
Mhm.
When she stepped down, I actually had a new CEO enter the business. And so while I thought I had the most perfect plan in the world and we were running that plan, he's come in with a different perspective and also a very different remit. And so not only are you trying to run a marketing plan that you believe in, but you're also building rapport at the same time. And the strategy shifted. So that meant that kind of what I thought was solid my thinking had to shift and evolve as well. And I think the dynamics are different, I think, depending on the stage of the business, the revenue at stake as well, for kind of how you adapt in these different situations.
So you've recently had to report to a CFO?
Not a CFO, no. So I reported into the CMO and then the CEO. I've never reported into a CFO, and I would probably say if I was asked to, it wouldn't be the right job for me.
Yeah, that would be scary as a marketer. Oh my gosh. But have you ever had to present something
Oh,
to get buy-in from a CFO?
absolutely. I've dealt with a CFO who I think in a lot of uh, these situations, I think right now as well, with efficiency being the name of the game, there's not a lot of wiggle room for tactics that aren't guaranteed to work. Which means what I'm seeing is, I think CFOs love, as you understand, numbers and numbers that can be proven. And so you tend to default on tactics like performance marketing, and, long-term tactics like brand awareness tend to fall away. And so I find that even with the data, even saying, look, I can correlate branded search to MQL volume. I can correlate an increase of brand awareness and sentiment with more people, searching and visiting our website. It doesn't matter if it's not dollar in, dollar out output. So I think that's always a challenging situation. And it's one of the questions you ask when you evaluate a brand. It's like, what do you think marketing's job is to do here? And you either are aligned or you're not. And they're gonna hire different types of marketers depending on that response as well.
When you say evaluate a brand, you mean one that you might want to work for?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually super interesting. Do you have, I'm just throwing this out there,
Yeah.
but
Let's do
like,
it.
do you have those kind of questions ready, or what do you look for when you're looking for a kind of brand to
Yeah.
work with?
I think when you're at an interview stage and thinking about your stakeholder map as well, obviously you'll have maybe the senior marketer who's interviewing you, or the CEO, or sometimes even a CFO, sales leaders. It's always kind of, what's the perception of marketing, what's the job to be done, and then of course what sales and marketing alignment look like here. That's outside of all the metrics of like business health, right? Like NRR and GRR, like we learned in CMO school with Pavilion. But I think it's really interesting because another question I like to ask is, what's your definition of demand gen?
Okay.
Because, you know, um, demand gen can be used, in exchange for lead gen. And we're talking just about demand capture at that point, where I personally believe that demand gen is about demand creation all the way through to capture. And that's where brand awareness and communities have a role to play. And everyone's going to have a slightly different opinion on that. And I think that for me is telling of the type of organization or the view of marketing's job to be done in that organization by asking that question.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Would it also change anything to see like what roles are reporting to who? Because I've seen somewhere online recently they had a debate where like, is it a red flag if content reports to growth or if content reports to demand gen? And I was like, oh, I never thought about it like that. But do you ever look at anything like that?
I, probably, but not
Yeah.
consciously. And then it would kind of be a flag. Like, so, again, you'll have demand gen job descriptions that are just looking after performance marketing. Whereas then you might have other demand gen organizations that also own field marketing and content, right? So I do think it's a bit telling if, in your world of SEO, if content's purely growth and then it's only there to do one job, which is search, and not paint this broader picture or be leveraged and, for distribution on multiple channels and, full spectrum, then for me that probably wouldn't be aligned to what I think it should be, but it's my opinion and it wouldn't be the right org for me. Yeah.
Right. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying the kind of stakeholder buy-in you would not try to do is change the entire perspective of what marketing is, but instead not the smaller things, but like, here's the strategy I want to do.
Do you know what? Yes. I mean, never say never. Like, that's our job to be done. But I also think we've got one of the hardest, and people say this all the time, one of the hardest jobs in the org, because everyone has an opinion on the jobs we're doing. We don't have opinions on finance, etc. So you do need, for me, like I'm paying really close attention to like the leadership teams of any org I'd be looking to join, because it really is about marketing being a revenue driver and a growth driver. And having trust in that leader and their leadership team to kind of execute against it. And I think it's hard right now because of kind of the macro environment, the funding, everything going on. So I don't think any of the decisions to look at short-term performance are wrong, because I understand why they're necessary now. But there's a little bit of not losing sight of the long game here, because it's going to be damaging, I think, if people are only thinking short-term for an extended period of time.
Yeah, this is actually something I wanted to ask you about. Is people are very short-sighted these days.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's dollar in, dollar out. If I spend this, how many leads am I going to get this quarter? But obviously marketing takes long-term vision. You said it yourself. You can correlate brand awareness with more revenue in the long term. But what do you do for long-term growth, and how do you keep executives happy when the results aren't coming immediately?
It's hard when you don't hit quota, or you've got a bad month. And so there's a couple of things there. Like, for not hitting target, there's an accountability. You've got to be on your numbers. You've got to be having conversations with sales, with rev ops, in those weekly meetings where you're on track. You're anticipating it. It shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be the end of the month when you're finding this out. So I think that's point number one is, communicate and be transparent and set expectations, then mitigate. There's no magic bullet. There's no, oh my God, we're halfway through the month and we're not going to hit target. Quick, come up with a quick marketing plan. Like, that's, I think every marketer's pet peeve. But what you can do in terms of, I think, maintaining the momentum of long-term growth is experiment and try new channels and tactics, right? And so if you have an idea, think about how you can start small and then scale from there. When we were building out our targeted account list program, every market was like, okay, I really want support from marketing to kind of, strengthen outbound. And it was like, okay, let's start with the UK. Why? We've got the strongest sales and marketing alignment. We've got agreement on what the target account profiling should be. We have an understanding of what marketing can do and what sales can do and how we kind of go in parallel. It's not going to be a playbook that works for all markets, but let's learn from that before we scale. And I think that helps set expectations with the business that things aren't going to happen overnight. But then when they are successful, great, now we need all the extra money. I also think in all of this, with the kind of brand building, there has to be always on aspects. We're not talking about taking 20 million and doing a big activation in the middle of Times Square, but we're talking about making sure that the channels that are low cost, you can keep, activated, be it your search, your social, some of your, PR, your executive profiling, thought leadership, things like that. So I think there's got to be a little bit of asking for forgiveness rather than permission, because if you're in an environment where you're having to run everything up and across, you don't really have the autonomy and you're not trusted as a marketing org.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you have your own kind of percentage of like, I normally ideally like to do X amount of performance lead gen or demand capture and X amount of demand creation?
I don't have an exact figure, because I think it's going to vary on the business, and also like how strong is their inbound engine, and like there's going to be, or are they relying more on outbound? But where I was trying to get things at one point in time was more of a 50-50 split, and where we ended up was more of an 80-20 performance to marketing split. And I was just at Cannes last week, and I think Rory Sutherland put up a slide like this showing over the years how it's just becoming so imbalanced because of it's a security blanket. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against performance marketing at all. I think it has a role to play, but we can't, it's getting so competitive, it's getting so noisy. You're not able to differentiate in the same way, but yet it's the only guarantee to show figures to a boardroom. And that's the scary part, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. What is this? I was going to say, what is the most challenging part about that? But that sounds like you've already said it. Is it the security blanket? It's what is guaranteed. But we know that we need to do other things. So like, how do you try to overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we specialize in what we specialize in because we've been studying it for a long time, and we're surrounded by amazing peers in the community that we're learning from. And so it just takes me listening to a podcast in the morning on my way, my commute in, going, okay, I'm not crazy. There's a lot of people who share the same sentiment. And again, these are people who have the same kind of level of experience of having living and breathing this rather than an outside perspective from a different team. When I did the marketing planning this year, even though initially the budget was flat, it wasn't about just, okay, let's take what we did last year and flip it over and everyone gets the same buckets. Really taking a step back and looking at the marketing mix to go, okay, yeah, we can understand the performance stuff really clear, but how can we try and dig into the event stuff, the content stuff, the PR stuff? Because again, if we keep this uneven weight of initiatives, we're never going to actually get out of this hamster wheel that we're in. And I believe that, spending time in community and stuff like that is actually what's going to influence the needle, and it doesn't have to be high cost. So with that, then, taking that data, I'm really excited about like tools like Hockey Stack that are, out there now that actually help cohort off some of these difficult to measure things, because there's no perfect attribution model. And I've never worked in a business where we can like go, oh, that attribution, let's take that for like, face value and say that this is what's moving the needle. So doing that modeling though, and actually looking at what data we did have, and also blending it with things like the anecdotal, how did you hear about us, right? Data that gives weight to some of those other channels, meant that when I was doing the budgeting, I could give that to the teams. And I didn't just kind of copy over 2023 to 2024. I took that bottoms up zero-based planning approach to go, okay, what do you actually need? What's your plan to get this done, aligned to our broader marketing vision? And it worked out. It wasn't the final budget we ran with in the end, but it worked out initially to kind of get the allocation done, and offset some of the uneven distribution. So use the data, but then also use the anecdotal stuff, and also then just trust your gut. Like we're hearing a lot about where things are shifting. Like when we made the decision to move from inbound to more of an all bound channel diversification strategy.
When you say zero-based planning, can you just define that? Is that just starting from scratch? And
Well, look, I'm not an expert, and I did Mark Ritzen's mini MBA where he goes into this in a lot of detail, but it's basically assuming you've got nothing, and to spend something, you make your business case for spending it, so you're actually modeling out the impact before, not just saying, hey, here's 20 grand, how do you want to spend it? It's going, I actually need 20 grand because it's going to move the needle.
Okay. And that's something that you guys practiced in your company, or you have been?
Not company wide. No, not company wide. It's something I think when I took the budget on, it was interesting because I remember having the discussion with the CMO. She's like, yeah, but these were the splits last year. And I'm like, I want to ignore the splits from last year. I want to start with what people think they need. If we're like 20% over, okay, fine. Then maybe I'm like so wrong. But I also trust the teams and individuals who own their own budgets to know realistically. We did kind of 3 phases of it. It was minimum viable. What do you actually need to get to target, to do what you want to do and run your plan? Then there was kind of, I forget what I called it, but it was like the most extreme scenario, like pie in the sky. If you had X amount of dollars to do whatever, like wild, crazy ideas, what would that be? We never even touched that budget. Of course, it was like way over budget, but the initial minimum viable with a little trade-offs, I think we were able to get there, which gave me a lot of confidence again in putting the trust back into the team owners to know really what they think they need to do to run and execute their plans.
Do you train them how to set a budget, or they already know how to do this?
I'd say probably more training would have been valuable. I think they would have appreciated that.
Yeah, because it's
And you're
kind
and budget time is like crazy, right? And like you're never given enough time, and then you're going through the rounds. So I wouldn't say I was like that was a best in class experience for
of
any of those
okay.
people. If you ask them, certainly not. Yeah.
Right. Okay. No, I think 'cause it's tricky to learn how to set a budget and say how much do you need to achieve your goals, and they're like, oh,
Well, if you're a marketing manager, you own a region. You're a regional
yeah,
marketing manager. You're a PPC manager. You're a PR leader. At a certain level, you are expected to understand how you're yeah.
yeah. Fair enough. What tools or resources do you use or frameworks do you use to show how marketing is contributing? And I know you already touched a little bit on it with Hockey Stack, Dream Data, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Um, I can't say in my last role we had the best data in the world, which made it even more difficult. Um, what I would say is, regardless of what tool you're using, because there's loads of tools out there, and I don't want to, plug a specific one. I think it's about being more thoughtful about what data you want to show and to what audience. So, kind of really establishing those tiers of data. Okay, if I'm presenting to the C-suite board, what's most important to them? And let's make sure that we kind of make that really clear and simple for them to get the right cadence and to digest that. Okay, the layer down. What are the data points that I'm looking at with the sales leader each week and the customer success leader to make sure that we're aligned and we're anticipating any gaps or how we're
Right.
going to mitigate. And then I think that starts one layer down. So I'm kind of going from the top down with the team, right? So like on Mondays, it's the marketing revenue team meeting where we're going, what are the different channels and tactics that led us to what outcome? Then on Tuesday, it's kind of the cross-functional team meeting. And then by the end of the week, you can level that up. So I think otherwise there's too much information. You're going to get executives in the weeds. They're going to be lost, or worse, they're kind of micromanaging how you're
Yeah.
spending, or vice versa. They're not actually able to kind of grasp what you're trying to communicate.
Right. So it sounds like you have a lot of meetings. I get
I think COVID kind of ruined meetings for everyone. I don't know. Maybe it was worse before then. I don't know. But just once you've been stuck at your desk all day, even going into the office, I find as much as I really, really value FaceTime with the team, I'm just stuck in a meeting room all day in meetings.
yeah. It's rough. I wanted you to tell the story that you brought up when we were having pizza a couple of weeks ago, where um, you joined the new company
Oh,
and was launching the new website, and you were able to get buy-in, even though being brand new for
yeah, yeah. No, because to your point of what we discussed, look, if you already asked the good questions and you understand the kind of uh, buy-in of marketing before you join an organization and you establish those relationships, you're always going to have to work on relationship building. And I remember at my more recent venture, when I presented the marketing plan and I'm using all this data to showcase brand and demand, and we're changing the mix, and the CEO is just like looking at me blank face, like, brand's a bad word. Totally different experience in this other company where I was their first marketer, like I was their first senior marketer, and so there was already trust established when they brought me in, and they had just rebranded, and it was really exciting because they're like, oh my gosh, did you check out the new brand, and like, did you see all our new websites? And I was only there for a week, and I'm like, okay, you've created all these sub brands, which like didn't really make sense if you're trying to kind of elevate your brand. And then from a website launch perspective, they had like 6 different sites all kind of cannibalizing each other. And I'm not overly technical when it comes to kind of that side of it, but I just took one look and was like, this is going to be problematic. And so, to kind of ride on their momentum, and I'm like, okay, hearing that for a startup, they spent like, I don't know, let's say like $100,000. I'm like, okay, this wasn't cheap. So I called a meeting, and it was like a half day workshop where, I put together some slides with just some very basic things on, establishing kind of brand credibility and use of the logo and how that, is leveraged to kind of create, awareness at like kind of the top level. And then went into a little bit more detail on the cannibalization side of the SEO stuff, and it was very clear to me that the agency was great at branding, but wasn't a technical agency. So we had to call them back in, and they admitted it in the room. Kind of, it wasn't about pointing fingers, just they joined the presentation. No, sorry, let me back up. I presented to the CFO and the strategy, chief strategy officer who kind of led the project, said, I think we need to speak to the agency again. The very next week we went to the agency. So here I am, like the new hire coming in going like, oh, we have to throw this all out. And it wasn't about throwing it out, but we did actually need to spend more money to get it right, because I could then kind of demonstrate the long-term impact it would have if we didn't fix it. And I think while it was challenging to have those conversations, I backed it up with data and examples and things like that. In the most basic terms, I can't remember the examples I used, but it was like, yeah, talking in pretty like layman's, like using like just really obvious examples that they could relate to. And it was like, yeah, you're right. We need to fix this. We didn't know what we didn't know when we started this project. So I think that also helped with my credibility early on, as the only female in the leadership team, quite a boys club joining it, but going, hey, you guys made the decision to bring me in. And very quickly, we kind of set ourselves on a good path.
I mean, that's scary because it's not only the extra money they have to spend, but they probably had been working on that for months.
Oh my, and they were so excited. They were so excited. But did you know what it was? I won't name the brand, but they wanted .com to be in their brand title, like in their logo. Like that's just one small example where I'm like, let's just use the brand name. You don't need to say .com anymore, guys. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in that one meeting when you shared them, here's the data, here's why it doesn't work, they were immediately like, "Oh, yeah, you're right," or was there any pushback?
I think there likely was. There was a bit of discussion, but it was like, let's just check with the agency. Let's make sure that they've done these checks on the website and they've thought about it from this perspective. And I remember being in the agency meeting, having a little bit of dialogue, a little bit of kind of pressing them a little bit. I think they were hiding behind some of their work. But in the end, when they agreed to some of the oversight, and that's all it was oversight or lack of expertise in some areas, it was like, yeah, this makes sense now that you brought this to light. So it was never a point of, if you don't do this, I'm quitting, that kind of thing. It was very, very, it was a dialogue that took a little bit of time as we got to know each other, but I think they appreciated the boldness so
Yeah.
early on.
I mean, of course, that's when you're hiring senior leadership, you're hoping that they're going to share their opinions and expertise and not just be like, "Oh, you decided this. Okay. I guess there's a reason."
I think the difference though is, yeah, that the opinion was shared and it was taken, it was valued, where you also will have some situations where marketers will show data, they will, like the brand example that we talked about, and it doesn't matter if your peers don't believe in it or it's just not what they understand. So it's kind of what you were telling me before we jumped on the call, that a lot of marketers are finding that, well, maybe it just means you joined the wrong company, which isn't a great place to be. You don't know, no one wants to kind of have to transition out when you kind of made that decision to join based on different values.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it might be that, but I've seen some marketers present things even to me where I'm like on their side because I'm trying to get them to help me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, this is not going to this is not going to convince anybody. And sometimes I have to coach them through it to be able to present.
What do you say in the, like, what are they missing when you feel like you've got to kind of feed that back?
So a lot of times, if it's an SEO, it's just too granular. If it's an SEO presenting to a head of marketing or VP of marketing or CEO or something, and then they start to talk about schema markup and technical SEO, there's no connection to how it's gonna.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no connection to, okay, how many like the questions is how many resources is it gonna are you gonna take my team's time to do this? Is it important? How quickly are we gonna see? They're not addressing the questions that these people are going to have, and they're just so stuck on why they think it's important versus what the other person might be concerned about.
And the impact, right? Yeah, the actual, yeah.
So that's what I see a lot. It's just lack of connection to the impact and lack of consideration for the other party's resources. So this is for me, agency side. But I imagine it's the same in some extent in-house, to where if you need to work cross-departmentally and you're presenting something, you do need to consider the resources that the other teams.
Yeah, and who your audience is and what they can. I think that's for any good influencing presentation is, what's in it for them, right? Like what's the key nugget that they need that's going to click for them to go, okay, don't need all the little, I trust that you'll get it done however it needs to get done. Just tell me what I need to know so that I can support you or not.
How is it affecting my targets? Because
Yeah.
everybody is also thinking my job is on the line. If I say yes to this thing, then I'm going to be supporting it, somehow endorsing it.
Well, it makes me think back to a conversation I was having this morning which is like about really having a stakeholder map, thinking about who in your sphere you need to have relationships with and influence. And even if it's not for tomorrow, because you know what that next project's going to be, but really kind of understanding the people around you or connected to the people that you want to influence so that you can say to them, how does my work impact the stuff that you're doing? So when the day comes, that relationship's established, that trust is established, and hopefully you guys can see eye to eye rather than kind of having to start from zero.
Yeah, powerful stuff. This feels like a good place to wrap it up. Lisa, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you for sharing all of this. I will be adding your LinkedIn
Sure.
to the show notes. Is there anywhere else you would like me to direct people?
No, I think LinkedIn's the best way to get a hold of me. And if anyone wants a virtual coffee, I'm always up for it.
Love it. I recommend getting a virtual coffee with Lisa or a real one if
Or a
you're
real one if you're in
by.
London.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. And for those listening or watching, please remember to subscribe and like and share it with somebody that might find this valuable. And I will see you on the next one.